How much water do you need to bring on board for an ocean crossing? Do you need a water maker at all? How much water should you plan to use per day? We're going to be talking about that right now in our cockpit for Cockpit Philosophy. Welcome to Wisdom. Electric motor.
Synthetic rigging.
Classic sailboat.
No electronics.
Crossing the Atlantic Ocean.
Going where the fair winds blow, our home is where the waters flow. We'll show you what we've come to know on board while sailing Wisdom.
So obviously water conservation becomes really important on a long passage like this, but it's not actually that hard. We have on board 8 tanks and they're all partitioned off. So we have calculated, depending on the size of each tank, how many miles we have allotted for each tank. It's also a really good way of keeping track of how much water you've consumed in a given amount of time. Now we do a lot of other practices to conserve water as well. One of them is showering, because showering probably consumes the most amount of water that you will use on a passage.
So to conserve water, we use a little tiny insecticide sprayer. It holds 2 gallons of water and we fill it up, and that is our shower water for both of us. So we put it in the sun, it gets warm, and then we take our shower. Now, we can take as long a shower as we want because we can't use more than those 2 gallons. It runs out, that's it. It doesn't then keep drawing from the water tanks, and then we, mysteriously, the water tanks ran dry and we didn't expect it.
The other large consumer of water on board is washing dishes. You can't get away with not washing your dishes, but you can use a tiny bit of water to do that. On our first Atlantic crossing, we actually had a saltwater pump. So we would use salt water to wash our dishes, and then at the end we would rinse them with a little trickle of fresh water. We didn't feel the need to do that this time because honestly, we don't use up that much water when you just have a little trickle coming out of your spout. The dishes get clean, you're using soap, it's all good.
So on our first transatlantic, we sailed all the way from Florida to the Azores over about 60 days, and we only used 50 gallons of water total. So we were not drinking enough, we know that, but we just weren't really thirsty. We just didn't use the water. And when we made it to the Azores, we had about 110 gallons left over that we never got to. So that taught us that we could use water a little more liberally because we don't need to mess with the saltwater part and all that, and then dealing with salty stuff. It's just so much easier to just use a little bit of fresh water, even if you use a little bit more, because you don't really use that much.
So the last and third time that we consume water on the boat is when we're drinking. It's probably the most obvious and the most important. The human needs to drink at least 2 liters of water a day to be healthy. We probably drink 1.5 liters a day each, and we're fine because we're not actually doing a lot of physical activity or sweating or anything like that. But we did calculate how much water we're allowed to drink each day, and we have plenty for each of us to drink 2 liters if we need to do so.
So the math is really simple. What you're going to do is you take your total number of miles that you're going to sail on your voyage, and then you're going to divide that by the number of gallons of water that you carry on board. So say you're doing 1,000 miles and you carry 100 gallons, that comes out to be 10 over 1, which means that every 10 miles you sail, you can use 1 gallon of water.
We carry on Wisdom 160 gallons of water in tanks. We're calculating 130 gallons so that we have a 30-gallon reserve if something is to go wrong. So with that math, on this current transatlantic that we are on, we are allowing ourselves 1 gallon every 30 miles, which is actually pretty reasonable.
Now, since we're sailing at about 100 miles per day, that means that every day we get to use a little bit more than 3 gallons of water. Now that's a lot of water. We never get near that amount used, but we could, and we'd still have enough water to make an entire voyage all the way across the Atlantic to South America. Now this brings us to the topic of water makers. We don't have one, and you really don't need one, and this is why.
Humans actually need water to survive. And water makers can be a big problem with that, because if you're relying heavily on a water maker to get you across the ocean, and that water maker breaks, you're done. You have no alternative. So having a water maker can be fine as long as you are not relying on it.
If you have a water maker, you still need to carry enough tank water to make the passage that you're going to be doing. So you still need to do that calculation of this is how many gallons we carry, and this is how many miles we have to sail, and figure out how many miles you need to sail for every gallon of water you consume. Because with that calculation, you will know that you have enough water to make it. If you have to take out a water tank to make space to put in a water maker, it's not a great idea, because you're taking out actual water that you can drink for potential water that you might not be able to drink.
So the water maker is something that is nice to have, but you definitely don't need to have one. Because the other giant problem with water makers is they draw a ton of power. And they take up a ton of space. They're huge. So if you can use that space for something more important, it's going to be better for you in the long run. And lastly, water makers are incredibly expensive and can be incredibly expensive to fix when something goes wrong. So save your money, save your space, save your electricity, and save your time. Don't get a water maker.
Now, there is the argument for a water maker where if you're just going to be hanging out anchored somewhere for a really long time, not near anything, you can now produce all the water you need. So you don't need to count on civilization to get you fresh water. Well, at the same time, you can also count on rainwater to fill up your tanks. So we carry a lot of tankage, and when we're in tropical areas, it rains pretty much every day. And when it rains, we collect water and we keep our tanks completely filled without ever having to go to shore to get water from shore.
So now it's time to hear from you all. We'd love to make this a conversation. Do you have a water maker, and do you rely on your water maker? How much water do you carry? And what do you do for an Atlantic or Pacific crossing when it comes to water conservation? Let us know in the comment section down below. And while you're at it, go ahead and hit like and share this video with your friends. Thanks for watching Wisdom's Cockpit Philosophy. We'll see you next time.
Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends.
And if you'd like to follow our journey in real time on a map, receive postcards from our ports of call, and message us directly to the boat, you can go ahead and become a patron using the link in the description down below.